Hey there, Independent Scientologists! Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the Theta Meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. I'm here with Quentin Stroud. I'm Jonathan Burke. This is season 6, episode 16. The title of this podcast at ao-gp.org is The Hidden Horrors of Time. And there are horrors in time. So this one is more Quentin's baby. He's really interested to talk about time. I think that would be safe to say. You find this an interesting subject, to say the least, wouldn't you, Quentin?
Man, time is time be timing. Let me tell you.
People be people.
we were people be people and time be timing. I would tell you, we kind of went into this a little bit when we were touching on the factors. If you go back and look at parascientology, episode or part 3, Parascientology Part 3, where we really kind of touched into time, and we had a brief though hit on it, but I really wanted to dive into this because I believe that when we look at, as LRH calls, I think in Dianetics, he says the basic aberration, okay, is time.
That's right.
Because it gets a person or a being stuck in this space of not really having a way out, because you're always dealing with it. One is always dealing with it on some level. And so when we really break down time, and we call it the hidden horrors of time, because there's this saying out there that time heals all wounds. Time heals all wounds, and that's absolutely not true. I have people who I have worked with who have been dealing with the same stuff over and over and over again, who has felt and had the same scars and pains in their soul for quite some time. And it is not true that time heals all wounds. It ain't it.
If that was the case,
So
we wouldn't need auditing.
Right. You were just as a being, you just let enough time go by, in the infinitude of all that is, you would just let enough time go by and, oh, I'm better now, but that's actually not the way it works. And so the reason why LRH looked at time and had a lot to say about it actually was because we know that time is not the universal solvent. Right. And so it's a better way. And so we're going to dive a little bit into this today and looking at how time actually has its horrors woven into it as a concept, as a physical universe mechanism, and how we can kind of rise above. So let's get into it.
Well, it's interesting to note that whether you are with a body or you are non-corporeal without a body, that time and its horrors still persist. And to have time, you have to have motion. So what does that tell you about ghosts, specters, and things like that? That they either don't have a perception of time and they are stuck in a particular time, or they're holding time in place on purpose. Those are the only two answers I have for it. But it's interesting that motion still occurs to them from their viewpoint, because you're not using eyes, physical body eyes, but they're still aware of what's going on around. So
well, LRH said, and you have the reference about time being the single arbitrary. What's the reference on that one?
Well, that's from the Phoenix Lectures. He says, time is the single arbitrary entered into life. It is well worth investigating on the part of an auditor. An unwillingness, this is really important, and I'm going to say what I said to you before we started the podcast, after I finish reading this. An unwillingness to tolerate viewpoints will cause a jam in time. The fewer viewpoints which an individual will tolerate, the greater his occlusion and the worse his general state of beingness is. As I said, an auditor can remedy this in various ways. The Middle East, there is an intolerance of viewpoints. That's just one case in point, but I mean, it's, you've got a piece of land that's being fought over by 3 different religions, and they're all intolerant of the other 2 religions' viewpoints.
Right.
So this gives you an example of how this, in a way, well, it's not just in a way. It's a parascientology subject, because I don't know how many people are familiar with the term revivification.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that before?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
To bring something back to existence or back
Right.
to life.
You're revivifying it. And what happens when you see a person go psychotic is they're revivifying this particular incident in time. They are creating this incident again as if it is happening now. So revivification is something that is a phenomena that is created by the thetan, by the person on their own. And you can have this in groups. We had and I think this is a funny story. So I find this funny. In Clearwater, Florida, on US 19, at the intersection of Drew and US 19, there was this I guess you could say it's kind of a corporate glass building, and it had that reflective covering on it that gave it kind of a, I don't know, it was a bronzish color, and in that glass was an image that looked like Mother Mary.
Okay.
And there were rows and rows of lawn chairs that were put out there, and it happened to be that there was a church inside, and they took it as a sign that this was, well, a serious sign. And people sat out there for years. So one day somebody came along and threw a rock at it and broke glass.
Oh.
So they had a big screen TV out in the parking lot plugged into a generator, and they had that in front of the rows of seats so people could come and look at this image of Mother Mary.
Okay.
Now, why do I say this? What does time have to do with that? I mean, when you look at it, it's like an enigma and an enigma and an enigma, because they're looking at something that doesn't exist in their mind's eye. They see this representation of this bodily form, and then somebody comes along and breaks it. Well, it's based off of a book of somebody's recollection of what this woman looked like from the book, then in the glass, then on the TV.
Right.
That's a weird phenomena.
That's a lot. That's stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. It's like, well, it's interesting because when we go back, if we go back to the beginning, right? Let's go back to the beginning or whatever that means. But LRH talks about us as a thetan, you as a thetan, as a being, you are a static, right? So no mass, no wavelength, no energy, no time or location in space, right? You just accept by your own consideration, your own postulate to be something, right? Or to be somewhere, or to exist at some point in time, right? So you in your purest form, you as you are, as a thetan, exists outside of time. And so it then makes sense when we talk about the hidden horrors, it then makes sense that you then, if you exist outside of something and you throw yourself into it, it could create some problems, right? So think about it this way. You as a human, Homo sapien, as a human being, you don't live in water. So then you throw yourself in water, you throw yourself in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, okay? Chances are it's gonna be kind of messed up at some point, right? That you could rock with it for a minute, you could backstroke, or you could float on a little floaty, you could get a little piece of driftwood or something to kind of make it through. But at some point, because you exist outside of this water, if you throw yourself into that, jump off a boat or something, you're going to be in a pretty bad situation at some point. Well, this is what happens. This is what happens to us as a being. Like, you exist outside of this concept, you exist outside of this thing, and then you throw yourself into it, matter, energy, space, and time, water, whatever. You throw yourself into it, you exist on whatever level you can exist in it, but chances are it's not the ideal scene for you, right?
Right.
And this is kind of what we're dealing with. And so if time then is not our natural state of being, if we don't necessarily exist as time beings, right? We exist outside of that, immortal, as a static, then how did we get into this? Where does this stuff come from? You mentioned about motion.
Well, it's motion, because without things moving, I mean, we live in a universe that is one big existential clock, because you have, at the micro level, you have quarks and all of these subatomic things that are moving around, shooting around something else, and then you have atoms. Okay, and what you could look at the design of an atom and you go, well, that looks like a solar system.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at a star and the planets that go around it, and then you look at a star system with planets going around it, and it's going around something else, and it's going around something else, and it's going around something else, and that's the center of this galaxy, and this galaxy is spinning, and we spin through space as a star system in a corkscrew fashion. And when something blows up, let's say a star goes supernova, the universe, the whole physical universe, that whole galaxy adjusts so that things are in balance and takes over that space. It's sort of like, let's say, you have a hole in a yard where a house was. Well, all of the houses adjust into that space, and they all have a little bit more space in that neighborhood. Well, it's the same way on a galactic scale. So without all of this motion going on, nothing would persist. Everything has to be moving in order to get this concept of time. So it's not just here, it's everywhere in this universe. That's how it's all set up, so that the whole thing can persist. And you've got this tugging and pushing and pulling of all of these bodies, galactic bodies in this universe, moving things around. And then you start to believe, well, this is it. This is as good as it gets. But it isn't. It isn't as good as it gets, because the thing is that one of the things that makes time real is agreement, per the axiom.
Right.
So you have to agree on it.
Yeah. And so as time being a consideration, it's an agreed upon decision that as this stuff is moving throughout the cosmos, as we're existing in space and around all these moving particles, all these moving things, we agree. I think LRH says in the factors, all these things regulated, right, is time. All these things monitored, because we now monitor the movement of the sun across the sky. We monitor the movement of the planets circulating around the sun. We're monitoring all these movements. These things, these movements regulated is time. And so time then being it's a consideration first and foremost. It's something that we consider as being something, right? When you think about if you talk about the cosmos, when you think about it, what time is it right now? Right? What, in the grand scheme of the universe, we look at we're in year 2023 or whatever. Well, what time is it? What year is it cosmically?
Right.
What year is it since the inception of planet Earth? Wait, do you know? We're looking at 2023 because that's some marker that we placed Anno Domini AD.
Right. The year of Christ's birth, AD or BC.
Yeah.
But like LRH talks about in the date locate HCOB, he says, look, when you're dating and locating a particular incident, you have to take whatever it is that the person is giving you, because it is only time is an arbitrary. Okay. And
Right.
like you're saying, as far as our Roman calendar and everything like that, that's a perfect example. But you also have to look at what is time as far as a year. Well, it takes our planet 365 days to rotate around the sun one time. While if you're on another planet in another lifetime, that planet may or may not be as close into that star. And it's more common, they're finding, that there are more binary systems, which means there are two stars that a planet can go around. It can go around two stars, or it can go around one, it can go around the other in a figure eight. Now, what kind of calendar are you going to have then?
Right.
It's all
How do you even
relative.
calculate that? Right.
Right. How do you even calculate that? Or where are we, around A or B? Okay, so this is part A and this is part B. But the thing is the thing that regulates the time even closer for us is the actual speed that the planet spins in a 24-hour and a couple of seconds rotation. If you're on a bigger planet, the planet's going to spin around at a different rate. And if it's a bigger planet, chances are it's further out from its star than we are from our sun. Not all stars are called suns. Only our star is called
Right.
a sun because it's called Sol, just so people know this. So
Right.
you have to take that into consideration. But it's also important to note that it's also relative to the fact that you have what they call the sweet spot. It's far enough out from the star that you don't boil, and far enough in that you don't freeze. So that depends on the size of the star. And our star is relatively small compared to some of the ones out there. And I mean by millions of times huge, much more huge. So
Amazing.
yeah, so this is a concept of time, is you're basing time off of all of these physical universe stable datums in
Right.
a body. But as a thetan, the only stable datum that you have is you yourself. And end
Yeah.
explanation.
Right. And so you get thrust, or you choose to enter into this game, right? The game of existence. You choose to enter into this game, this agreed upon game that we're all playing on, this field of awareness that we're all existing in, and or that those who exist in, and you play this game. And this game is the agreement of the physical universe, this game of matter, energy, space, and time, this game of how we as thinking things, as statics with the ability to postulate, consider, and have opinions, we then come into this experience and we say, oh, that that something is should persist or should continue, right? So we have now there's an admiration, if you will. We talked about this in the last podcast. There's an admiration for relics, and there's an admiration for old archaic buildings and edifices that were built, in the Stonehenge or
Yeah.
the pyramids or whatever. Like, because there's this idea that, wow, this has persisted for so long, whatever that time period is. There's this idea that it shouldn't have, and yet it has, and so
Mm-hmm.
therefore it's worthy of this admiration. I get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get so wrapped up into it. So we're now playing this game, and in this game, of course, time being a basic source of aberration, the basic aberration is time. It causes us, based on our level of awareness, where you are, in your tone level, where you are in your level of awareness, it causes us to perceive time differently.
Mm-hmm.
Hear me.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said it earlier, that what did it say? It says an unwillingness to tolerate viewpoints will cause a jam in time. The fewer viewpoints which an individual can tolerate, the greater his occlusion, and the worse his general state of being.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on where you are on the tone scale, depending on what's going on with you as a being, you can't tolerate certain things. You can't talk about occlusion. You can't even see it. You can't even see certain things. You can't even perceive of certain things. So could there be, just a question, parascientology, could there be things that have existed from time immemorial, that have been there from a long time ago, but because we have fallen in consciousness, we've degenerated in awareness, we can't even perceive them yet.
Yep.
Back in the old days, they would talk about fairies, and they would talk about elves and gnomes and da 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 da. They would talk about all these things. I don't know. Could there be some things that were being perceived at that time that we just can't perceive it, because now we got electricity and solar, lights and solar panels and da-da-da. We can't see certain things. If you go out into the country now, if you go out into the province, into the country where there's no city lights, you can see the stars more brilliantly.
Much more clearly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Much more clearly.
And so some things might have just fallen from our level of awareness because of time. Isn't that something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can feel the passage of time change when you go from downtown Manhattan out into upstate New York.
That's true.
You can feel the difference in time, because there's a perception of rush, hurry. Look out, there's a taxi coming. You got to watch your back. You get mugged.
Motion.
You go out into the country and the trees are blowing in the wind. There's a cow standing over there just slowly chewing its cud. Wheat's blowing in the wind. And so the passage of time and the perception of time is so different. Now, and it's important to note in this way, and I was going to say this, I didn't want to interject it into what you were saying, but it's interesting to note that my generation, 50 something, when you go into grocery stores and things like that now, even here in South Africa, they're playing the hits from the 80s.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, I've been to 5 or 6 places today, and they're all playing the same music. I think I'm being targeted. You're being targeted. The reason why I say this is because when you think back to when you were in high school and you were listening to the radio, or, well, now it's a whole different ballgame as far as Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, all that. Your viewpoint on time, everything seemed to take so much longer. Especially when you were a little kid. Oh, I just want to go out and play. Everything took forever. And when you get older, you go, damn, it's October 26th already. Gosh, it seems like October 1st just was last week. So your perception of time changes. And part of the thing with that's a bit of a lie, that's part of the horrors of time, is your thyroid is your system clock in a body. It is the same thing that you have to a system clock in a central processing unit in a computer. It's the clock speed. And if you have thyroid problems, you'll see that your time sense is off one way or the other. Yeah. And people that have their thyroid removed tend to typically go insane, because
my friend Steven, golly, crazy as a loon.
Yeah, because it is something that ties in to the physical universe and gives the body a clock speed with which to operate. And as you get older, its clock speed slows down. That's the perception you have with the body of, oh, wow, things are going so much faster. So it's important to note that where you were at in time, the things that you saw, you heard, you felt, you experienced back when you were younger, have a different perception of the time that was going on then as opposed to now.
Right.
So the body ties into that.
Yeah, and can therefore make it more challenging in order to deal with. It can make it more challenging. This whole idea that time heals all wounds or whatever, it can make it more challenging to deal with, because at the perception level you were in, whatever trauma, whatever incidents, whatever stuff that happened, at the perception level you were in at that time, you're operating at we're just a whole 2023, we're operating in something totally different now when it comes to time and movement of cars and motion and stuff like that. It's a lot different. And so, you know, we have these sayings, the land that time forgot, you know, or whatever, or a ghost town. We'll call it a ghost town because it's just so slow and no life, no activity there. You know, there ain't no nightlife there. You know, it's a ghost town.
It's a sleepy town.
A sleepy town. Yeah. So we have these ideas. So now because we understand that time, that we exist outside of time, we dive into it in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the ocean of time, in the middle of the time, we're trying to exist into it, trying to drift through it, trying to get through it, right? It then becomes the basic source of aberration because we're now in this stuff that we ain't supposed to necessarily exist in, except by consideration. And then we have to kind of figure our way through it. So then memory, this is good. Then memory, trauma, incidents, stuff like that on the time track can then trap a bit of our attention in these moments. I literally remember this when I was a kid and I had this thing on my leg and it was this hit that happened on my leg, and I can go back and I can totally relive that experience. And in the moment, it felt like I was in this for, I don't know however long, but it was hours. Seemingly, it was a long time that I was dealing with this pain. But really, it happened. They rushed me to the hospital, and I was good, you know, shortly thereafter. But it seemed like it was like forever that I was dealing with this.
Yeah.
So how does time mess us up, right? How does time confuse us? How does time keep us in this state of unknowingness about a thing, and therefore it persists because the lie of time is factored into it?
Well,
is that a thing?
Yeah, where you look at it and let's say every day is a different file folder, and after a while you have a ton of file folders, and you're like, well, where's that one specific file folder that had to do with this? Or your notes on your desk, and what page did I put that particular note on, that password? I mean, I've got that here. Where's that password? Which notepad is it in? They all look the same. I made the mistake of getting this several of the same notepads, so there's no identification of different
day after day after
day, you know, unless you put a date on it. That's why LRH was so keen on putting the date on everything. You'd say at the beginning of a lecture, what is the date? Because he knew
that's good.
Yeah. And then this also has to do with the data trail. And it's one of the things that you see with the church is as they've started, it used to be, it was policy that when you made a change, there was a typographical error or something was added to it that LRH asked at the top, it would say, okay, these changes were made. They're in this type of text on this date. And then Miscavige took that out. So now you've got this hidden data trail of what's changed. Like we've said before in many podcasts, the hardest thing to spot is a missingness. This has to do everything with time. Okay. So you have an HCOB that's been altered and nobody told you it was altered. So the hardest thing to spot is the missingness of what the alterations were because it wasn't noted on the HCOB. So they keep changing these things and now you don't know what they are. And you just think this is what LRH said. This is a perfect allegory, for a person's time track based off of what we were talking about in the Phoenix lectures. It has to do with viewpoints. Because if, let's say you're in a particular valence and then your valence changes to somebody else, or it just becomes you. You are not a valence. You don't have a valence. You are just you. That's your beingness. But when you're dealing with viewpoints, like in a PTS potential trouble source suppressive person situation, you're dealing with viewpoints that you can't tolerate. That's why PTSness is as dangerous as it is. That's what makes a person a potential trouble source. They're a potential trouble source because they cannot and have an unwillingness to tolerate a viewpoint. Jams them up in time. Their attention gets stuck on it. They make mistakes.
Yeah.
So these things hang people up. Is it stuck attention? It's ridges that are being put there. This has to do with CS Series 37R about high TA, and that a person will ridge up against something because they are overrun on it. They don't want to do it anymore. So a ridge gets stuck there. So maybe they're not stuck in it as a valence, but it's something that they are stuck on because who made the ridge? Well, now you've got this Lego sitting out in space that there's this ridge on this. And then over time, now you've got a gazillion Legos that are all over, spread all over the physical universe, that they're your ridges. So you have to take ownership of those and get the proper time, Axiom 38, time, place, form, and event of these things in order to
oh, that's so good. Because I was gonna go into the whole time, place, form, and event idea. Like, and we can get into it when we talk about the last part, which is going to be about auditing. But because if we're stuck on the time track, if your attention is stuck somewhere on the time track, you've hit a ridge. It gets you so fixated on that. Ouch! Remember, I don't know if you remember Family Guy.
Yeah.
And Peter would hurt his knee. He would do it for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Funny.
Yeah.
But my point is that you get your attention stuck so much on this pain, this incident, that it sticks you there.
Yeah, it's your resistance.
Yeah, you don't want to feel that, right? You don't want to go through that, right?
Right, because
there's some resistance to it.
It's important to note here. What is it that you don't want to go through?
God,
you don't want to go through that time.
Unwillingness to tolerate viewpoints. Yeah,
right. You don't want to tolerate that tone level of pain, because that is a lower version of ARC on the tone scale. So you don't want to tolerate time.
Yeah.
Why don't I want to wait in lines? I'm OT8. If I see a line, fuck that. I'll go somewhere else. I'll come back at 8:00 in the morning when there isn't any line. Because I don't want to tolerate that time. No way. Not in South Africa. Hell no. I don't want to do that. Even in the United States.
Well, and you can look at that even from a place of like this. Let's bring it up to 2023, right? So for all those who are listening to this, like, you can look at this in your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where you might have seen they might be giving out food to the homeless, or they might be giving out, some food for the holidays or whatever. And there's a long line of people. It could be even like, I remember they opened up a restaurant and they were giving away free chicken sandwiches, the Popeyes chicken sandwich or whatever. And it was a long line of people, and they would just stand in line. You might have been trying to go to a concert or something, and a long line of people standing in line. And if you got enough money, if you got enough influence, if you got enough wherewithal, right, you'll be like, no, I'm gonna bypass all that, right? I'm not gonna deal with any of that, and I'm gonna make that happen. As opposed to standing in line and going through the security line in the airport. I travel a lot, and I can't stand standing in the security line. So I have the I have the clear, and I have the TSA pre-check, and I have all those little things set up for myself. I do not like standing in line. It's such a thing.
Yeah.
And when you got enough resources, you have enough wherewithal as a being, you don't have to.
Right.
Right.
That's a beingness. But I mean, it comes back to when you tell somebody, how long does it they say, how long does it take to become an auditor? And they say, well, from the bottom to class 4, it took me 6 months full time, 12 hours a day. And they go, ooh. Okay, why did they go, ooh? What was it?
It's time.
It's time. That thought bubble comes up as, you mean I got to spend that much time doing that? Right. So, I mean, you can also say it's effort, but to me, it always comes across as, it's the first question on everybody's mind. How much time is it? How much time is this going to take? Right. What are you doing with your time anyway? True that. You see, so you would rather do X instead of Y. So it's time is put into the category of effort in order to do something. Always, that's the first thing that people look at is how long am I going to have? What do I have to do on ProTRs? Well, you got to sit there and be comfortable for 2 hours. Wait, what? 2 hours? I can't do that.
I have to be comfortable for 2
2
hours.
hours? I can't smoke. I can't drink. I can't chew my fingernails. So it's important to note that that's one of the biggest worries that a Thetan has is time and how much time it's going to take, as opposed to what they would rather be doing. Anyway.
Right. And one of the biggest things we say, that's a waste of my time. That's a waste of my time, you know. But it's only because we've identified so much with the mess universe. We've identified so much with the physical body. We've identified so much with it that to some people, 2 hours or 6 months at full time, 12 hours a day, whatever, that's a lot of time out of their life, out of their whatever that finite little zone that you have to operate with.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you have an allotment, and half of that is spent sleeping.
And there you have it, right? And so if time is a basic aberration per LRH, you just said we worry so much about time. We get to this place where how do we get out of that sea of time? How do we get out of that ocean of time and we get into a more natural state of awareness, right? That's more at home for us as a Thetan, right? How do we kind of rise above, if you will?
Well, we talked about that in podcast before last, where it was about conceptual understanding, because time is a lie, and you're having to sit there and think about, okay, I've got to do this, and it's going to take so much time. Look how much time this took. What a waste of time. I don't have time for this. I mean, it's we say it probably 30 or 40 times a day, and it's important to look at that. Whatever you do in the physical universe, you have to sit there and figure out, okay, I want to make X amount of money so that I can have X amount of things. All right. So what repetitions am I going to have to do in order to do that? You could flip burgers, and you have to do millions of burgers, millions upon millions of burgers to buy a house. Or you have to sell thousands of cars in order to buy a house. Or if you don't work for somebody else who is taking a lion's share of the profits and you do it for yourself, you're going to have to take so many months to figure out how to do something, and you may not even succeed then. So it's the number of cycles of action in the physical universe. That's one way to look at it. That's the low level way to look at it. Then we get back to our prosperity series that we did last month, where it's beingness.
Right.
That's where you go to the front of the queue at the club and you get in. Into the
because
club.
of who you are.
Because
of who you are.
That's right.
Good.
That's right. That's right. Because who you are is
so go ahead. Oh, sorry, finish your flow. Finish your flow.
No, I mean, it's just who you are is to the degree that time either cooperates or doesn't cooperate with you, and the number of cycles of action that you have to do in order to achieve a desired goal.
Listen, listen to this podcast again, please. I know it's a lot of stuff, motion and particles and quarks and atoms. I know it's a lot, but listen to it again, because it all comes down to this. The reason why we as independent Scientologists focus so much on truth, on the tech, on auditing and getting in session is because if you increase your beingness, it changes everything else. Okay? The old saints used to say, seek ye first the kingdom and all other things will be added unto you. If you get this, if you go with it, if you go and deal with self, if you deal with you, if you sit in that chair, you grab them cans and you get free. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to reach a state of awareness clear, OT levels, whatever you want to call it, you're going to reach a state of awareness where time is not impacting you the same way. Doesn't mean you don't exist in it. Doesn't mean you're not aware of it. You are. But I think LRA says it this way. It says that in the OT levels that you have a complete cause of matter, energy, space, time, thought, and life. Boy, oh boy, it's not, if you want to get into the club.
Yeah, well, it's as close as you can get to a time machine. I have people tell me all the time, and there it is again. There it is again, the word time.
All the time.
I have them tell me all the time, how is it that you do so much that in one day? It's easy.
Yeah.
I'm just being who I need to be and who I want to be.
Right.
And time, for lack of a better word, time speeds up. You get more things done in a period of time because you are being who you need to be. If you're in a job that you don't like and you're sitting there and you're a hamster in a wheel and you're just doing the same thing over and over and over, I mean, I could just ask you, are you being who you want to be? Nope.
Right.
Nope. You are not.
Or are you? Or yeah, go ahead.
Or are you being somebody else? That's
or are
all
you being a body?
Right. Are you just being a body and you're just moving Legos around all day? That's the lowest level. I mean, you look at blue collar jobs and white collar jobs. You're just in a blue collar job, you're just moving this thing from one place to another that creates this thing over and over and over millions of times. People do it their whole lives, working in car manufacturing plants and factories and stuff like that. That's blue collar. White collar is different, where you're being more OT. You're working smarter. You're not working harder.
More causative.
Right.
Yeah.
And to the degree that you can be who you want to be is to the degree that you can get a lot more things done in a given day and still have time to play around and do aesthetics and things like that. That's all there is to it. And it's I don't know how better to put it than that it is to the degree that you're being you, then to the degree that time speeds up for everybody else. And they're like, how did you get all that done? And to you, it was like, yeah, I had time to make a really nice meal and everything else. So you can control time through beingness. And that is what makes time not a horror, because time is a horror when it's like, okay, I have to spend all this time doing this. Okay, maybe you want to do that, but you need to change your beingness in order to do that. Because when you change your beingness, right, what it's not Scientology if it isn't fun. And that's all there is to it. If you do time properly, everything is going to be fun because you're being who you want to be. You're in the right place at the right time. That's what it's all about.
And think about it this way. I love that you just said that, and we can close out with that. It's not Scientology if it's not fun. Listen, it takes us a lot of time. I'm using that in air quotes. It takes us a lot of time to prepare these podcasts, to get stuff ready, to put it on the YouTube and put it on the Buzzsprout and put it on the website. It takes a lot of time to do that relatively, but it's fun. Like, listen to the way we're having this conversation. Listen to the way this thing flows. Like, it's fun for us. We just looked up and we're like, oh my God, it's been almost, the time period. So like, all I'm saying to you is this: please reach out, get yourself in session. That really is the answer. If you want to go on the college side and do the training route and get some tech in, go ahead and go on the college and get some tech in. Know what's happening here. Because just by studying this stuff and reading this stuff and delving into it, you get this level of awareness and enlightenment that it really does change how you flow and how you operate on this planet. This is Scientology. This is the study of Scientology, and this is how we're applying it and sending it over to you. I hope you really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this conversation, Jonathan.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And in the end, when somebody is a professional, you see somebody being a professional, it's because they have a conceptual understanding of it and that they enjoy it and it is fun for them because they are being a professional, whatever it is. And we can help you do that with auditing and training. And life can be fun. I guarantee you, in this, even in this day and age, with all the insane things going on, you can still be and do and have all the things that you want, but you have to get a master of time by being who you want to be. And we can help you with that here at ao-gp.org. So thanks for listening, folks. We really appreciate all of the positive comments on YouTube that we get for the podcast. And we will see you tomorrow for our third installment this week, or our sixth installment. Isn't that right? This is 4, 5, 6th installment of our Parascientology podcast for the Halloween season, which is coming up next week. We'll talk to you soon. Namaste, and we love you.
Admiration.